It took me longer than I expected to get back to work on this quilt, primarily because this pattern is so busy that it was very difficult to do free motion quilting. So I learned a lesson that if you have very busy fabric, probably do some simple quilting and not try to draw pictures with thread. But I did like the way it turned out on the purple. You can see my butterfly. I did this in sections because it was just too much for me to handle all in one piece. So I have 4 of these sections and I'm going to attach them together now. I've already trimmed my pieces because of course I had batting sticking out in the raw edges, and I squared up this top before I sandwiched it together, and so then I just trimmed off the batting and the backing and ended up with a lot of scraps, you can see. And now I'm going to attach the two pieces together, and here are 2 of my pieces. And when you do the quilt as you go, you can trim it off here because you're going to attach your batting together. If you just sewed it all together, and then did a little hem at the back, you'd end up be so bulky. So you don't want to do that. But what I'm going to do in this particular instance, I'm going to sew on top of the batting, and I'm going to sew 2 of my pieces together, and these are the front pieces I have pinned together. And then, so it'll be like, after it's sewn, it'll be like that, and then I'm going to trim this here. Okay, and here I am. I've stitched my 1/4 inch seam, as you can see, and the reason I chose to do it that way is because I want my batting to stay put, and this just seemed an easier way to me. And here's the front of the quilt and what it looks like after I had just did that 1 stitch. And with this quilt, I did have to label things before I did the free motion quilting, like the top left, bottom left, top right, bottom right. But once I had done my quilting, because I did directional and because I did some pictures on it, I knew which direction I was going in. But if I had any doubt, I would label these, make sure everything was properly positioned before I attach those together. And this is what right now, this is what the back is looking like. So what I will do is I will trim this piece of batting to match up there and hand sew these pieces together, and then I will turn this under. I'll probably hit it with an iron and turn it under just that same 1/4 inch seam, possibly a little less, just to make sure everything matches up. And then I will hand stitch that together, and hopefully it'll all look nice and neat. And that's how I attach these separate pieces. I ended up just finger pressing my hem under, and I've got it all pinned down, and all I have to do now is hand stitch it. It'll be nice and neat. I did want to tell you guys I had another challenge with free motion quilting. The top of this, because this I have having a lot of threads breaking. Like sometimes I wouldn't even get an inch and the thread would break. And some things I had to do to troubleshoot that was I checked all my settings on my machine, tried a new needle, tried a different brand of needle, different threads, had to adjust my tension, and And I may have had more than one problem going on. My bobbins were wound unevenly sometimes, and I think that could cause me a problem. Also, this fabric is thicker than the quilts I previously did, and I think that may have been a big part of my problem. I ended up switching out to a size 16 needle, and I had a lot easier time after that. It was also much easier to quilt this purple fabric. It is slightly thinner, but I could also see where I was going and see what I was doing. So because the pattern made it challenging, I think I was hesitating and not operating the sewing machine smoothly. And that was probably making me have a lot of breakage and tension problems. And now I'm going to attach my other two pieces, and this is the bottom of the quilt. And I tried to do a flower because I drew out my design on a piece of paper, but I quickly abandoned that when I realized how difficult it would be. I have a lot of threads I need to cut, but that also helped me orient my pieces because I knew I'd be piecing them together later. There's another little butterfly. So I was attempting to repeat some of the pattern in the fabric, and then of course I wanted butterflies because of butterfly blocks. And another tip, if you're doing the quilt as you go, you need to make sure you don't quilt all the way to the edge, because you need that room for your seam allowance for when you join these pieces together. So give yourself a little bit of room there. Make sure you don't go all the way to the edge, because then you'll have to use my favorite tool, which is the seam ripper, which I always keep my seam ripper nearby, but we don't want to use it unless we have to. So I have my pieces I was working with. I have them pinned together, and I was going to finish these with a hand stitching, but I don't want to stitch all the way to the end of this side, because that's where I'm going to join additional pieces. So I want to make sure I leave this seam allowance. So here I have my quilt all attached and pieced together.